This is the goal, is to say, look, you need to draw a line in the sand. There has to be some line at which this is no longer considered pro-Israel. We will not allow people who are anti-Zionist and anti-Israel to masquerade under a pro-Israel platform.
This is Faith Complex, a dialogue about the entanglement of religion, politics and art.
Hello, my name is Jacques Berluneblau of Georgetown University, and you're watching Faith Complex. Joining us today is Mr. Michael Goldfarb. Mr. Goldfarb was Deputy Communication Director for the McCain campaign in 2008, and he is online editor of the Weekly Standard. Mr. Goldfarb, welcome to Faith Complex.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, there's this new thing in town that goes by the name of J Street, and if I'm not mistaken, you had a couple of things to say about J Street. So let's ask you, what is J Street? What are they after?
Well, that's the fundamental question, isn't it? Is what is J Street? And there are multiple answers depending on who you ask, including their own supporters. But J Street itself purports to be a pro-peace, pro-Israel organization, and their goal is to sort of fill what they claim is a void, which is they believe that the mainstream constellation of Jewish organizations, particularly AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, is not representing and speaking on behalf of the moderate middle mainstream of American Jews.
And do you think there's any validity to that claim?
No, I don't, unfortunately. I think they're not wrong that there is a large number of Jews who feel like AIPAC does not represent their views. That's true. But that is not the moderate middle mainstream. In fact, the group that most fervently supports this group is actually a rather fringe left-wing element. And look, they are not well represented by AIPAC. AIPAC is an organization that the fundamental tenet of AIPAC's policy is to defer to the Israeli government. They will support the Israeli government policies and try and facilitate a good relationship between Israel and the United States based on those policies.
Okay, now their argument, of course, is simply supporting everything the Israeli government does might not be in the best interests of the Jewish state. Do you think there's any validity to that?
The thing that separates AIPAC from J Street is this is sort of a paternalistic attitude, right? That you know better than the Israelis what's in their own best interest, that you somehow feel compelled to push on them a policy that is in their own best interest even though they don't realize it. AIPAC doesn't do that.
Earlier you alluded to some ambiguity in their messaging, that J Street is many things. Do you think that's inadvertent, that they're discovering exactly who they are as they blossom and grow, or do you think there's some duplicity involved and they're not telling the world what they really are?
I've had a chance now to talk to the leadership at J Street, and I don't believe it's duplicity. I think that the head of J Street, Jeremy Ben-Ami, I believe, you know, he's a left-wing guy, he's a Democratic operative, he is a partisan, but he is not a guy who is not trying to do what he thinks is best for Israel. He is genuinely pro-Israel. I think everyone at that organization is genuinely pro-Israel. The problem is the policies, if they've endorsed, have attracted people who are not pro-Israel, who are in fact anti-Zionist, and would self-describe as anti-Zionist. So this was the problem we saw at their conference.
What percentage do you think it was? J Street will claim that was just a fringe, and out of a sense of respect for dialogue and discourse, we simply gave them a hearing. Doesn't mean we agree with them. If you were to put a number on it, what percentage of one-state solutioners and anti-Zionists were at that J Street conference?
I'd say it's somewhere around 10%, but it's a very loud 10%. And I think you can't invite people to your conference who express views that are directly at odds. So you really come up to a point where I think they fear that if they start cutting off certain elements, even on the fringe, that they will lose a lot of their support, that a lot of their support and energy comes from this far left wing. And without that, they're not going to be as powerful an organization, but at the same time, it's tearing the organization apart.
So the 10%, did you get the feeling that maybe in the last couple of weeks they've decided they're going to purge that 10%?
I think that they realized for the first time that they had a very serious problem. I think this was an organization that craved legitimacy, and they have they've sort of skated by under the radar for the last year and a half since they stood up. They had one major problem, which was when they came out against Israel's operations in Gaza.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Tell us, well, we know, but why don't you rehearse for us what their position was on Operation Cast Lead?
They came out and put out a statement that said something along the lines of, while there's nothing right about raining rockets down on southern Israel, there's also nothing right about an operation that collectively punishes Gaza. It was a statement that put Israel and Hamas in the same category, as though they were behaving in the same way, and sort of, we're going to be even-handed.
Equivalence.
It was a pure equivalence.
Right.
What's going on here? And what they failed to understand was, of course, American Jews would rally to Israel in a time of war. In a time of war, American Jews will rally to Israel, and America will rally to Israel. And J Street, for some reason, there's something about the ideology that underpins this organization, this sort of extreme dovishness, that even in a time of war they were unwilling to rally to Israel. And this really was very damaging for them. And it was the one moment in that 18 months where they seemed out of step, really out of step with American mainstream Jews, and that their whole claim is to represent this mainstream, so it caused a problem.
I would agree with you. I think it was a tactical misstep, and I think the claims they made were just ludicrous. However, I have noticed, and I think you've noticed, and I think writers at the New Republic have noticed, that the group seems to be centering itself.
I think J Street is tacking right, and we saw this as attacks from critics piled up. And as this story gained steam, we saw that J Street tried to tack to the right and sort of put some of this down. And Jeremy Ben-Ami did that by going and giving an interview to Jeffrey Goldberg, who plays a very sort of prominent role in these kind of questions. And what he said was that his organization would never support any cutoff in aid to Israel. He denounced Stephen Walt and Mearsheimer as anti-Semites. He made a bunch of other statements that, and sort of said, I want to be attacked from the left. He sort of put out a call, I want to be attacked from the left, and the left responded with alacrity and attacked him.
Well, to which I say, mazel tov to Jeremy Ben-Ami.
I agree.
Can you join me in that mazel
I agree,
tov?
and look, I talked to Ben-Ami at the conference, and I said, look, this organization described in this interview, that's not an organization that bothers me, that I worry about. And to the extent that, we were out there and we're, making these attacks on J Street, this is the goal. This is the goal, is to say, look, you need to draw a line in the sand. There has to be some line at which this is no longer considered pro-Israel. We will not allow people who are anti-Zionist and anti-Israel to masquerade under a pro-Israel platform and make these kind of statements. Well, look, in the week and a half leading up to the conference, we started going through who the speakers were at this conference and who the sponsors were and the members of Congress. And there started to be this steady drumbeat of people pulling out. And by the end of it, 17 people.
You were beating the bass drum there,
yes,
Mr. Goldfarb.
I absolutely was.
All right.
I absolutely was. And by the end of it, 17 people at either, I think there were 13 members of Congress who dropped their support for it, and 4 speakers dropped out, 3 cut after they were cut from the program by J Street after we showed videos of them saying really anti-Israel things.
You were showing them the 10%. Let's be honest here. All right, there is that fringe there, and you were showing them, as is your right as a citizen.
They were on the conference program. We decided to look into it, and these people, it turns out, should not have been on the conference program. It was inappropriate.
Okay, all right. Let's get back to the the diaspora homeland problematic. We know that in Israel, Obama's approval ratings, if you will, hover between 4 to 8%. They're extraordinarily low. We know that in the United States, 77 to 78% of American Jews voted for Barack Obama. His approval ratings are around 65%. Do the numbers indicate some sort of divide in world Jewry, or at least between the 2 huge chunks of world Jewry in the United States and Israel? And is that perhaps one place where J Street can play a useful role?
I think obviously it indicates there is a divide here. And I suspect that divide is likely to grow as time goes by. But I think ultimately the left, the American Jewish left, failed to comprehend what it would mean for Barack Obama to be so unpopular in Israel. They wanted a more even-handed approach. They thought that if Obama was tough with Israel, that would sort of give the United States credibility in these negotiations and make things easier. It turns out that the effect was to drive the Israeli public toward Netanyahu and to really handicap his domestic opposition, the Israeli left. And so now you have a situation where Bibi's not really under a lot of pressure. Bibi can sort of thumb his nose at the White House without fear of political repercussions at home, as there traditionally is for any Israeli prime minister who causes a breach in the U.S.-Israel relationship, because everyone in Israel blames that breach on Obama.
Do American Jews sitting in the comfort of the United States have a right to criticize Israel, and ought Israel even listen to American Jews?
Look, they have a right, obviously, to criticize Israel. Should the Israelis listen? I mean, that's a question for the Israelis. I think the core point on this, and what really concerns American Jews, the genuine mainstream of American Jews, is that the rest of the world criticizes Israel endlessly, mercilessly. The United Nations criticizes Israel. The Europeans criticize Israel. The Arab League criticizes Israel. What the world does not need is another group to criticize Israel. I mean, yes, of course, there's legitimate criticism to be made, but it's being made. We don't need another organization,
so
to
maybe
my mind.
The Jewish critical genius should be tamped down a little bit when it comes to Israel.
Well, AIPAC's position has always been that this criticism should be behind closed doors.
In-house, right.
Which, you know, I think as far as it goes, that probably works most of the time. But of course, there are situations where I've gotten very upset and been very public in my criticism of Israel. Situations they've sold arms to the Chinese, particularly unmanned surveillance aircraft. They've sort of helped the Chinese with their development of this stuff, but this is really troublesome. You can't have an ally who gets massive amounts of U.S. military aid, sharing technologies with a near-peer competitor of the United States.
And you identify yourself as a Jewish American,
yeah,
I take it?
So
what's the proper position there?
In that case, I was furious, and I wrote about it and said, you know, geez, this is outrageous. And the Bush administration cut military contacts with the Israelis for a very brief time over this until the issue was resolved. So, you know, obviously there is a time when you want to be very public and vocal in your criticism of Israel. I tend to think that those issues do not have to do with the Israeli-Palestine conflict, though.
All right, so we've looked at J Street's position on the Gaza war. Another problematic position they took was on the Goldstone report, where they refused to either condemn or embrace the findings of the report. What would you make of that?
I would say that this was part of this realignment that we saw in the weeks leading up to the conference. As J Street's legitimacy and its credibility came increasingly under attack and into question, J Street felt compelled to sort of, they couldn't quite hold the positions they wanted to hold. So in the case of Goldstone, there were two real issues like this. There was Goldstone and sanctions on Iran.
Right.
On both those issues, prior to the conference, J Street had put out statements that did not condemn the Goldstone report. They had also put out statements condemning sanctions on Iran. They were opposed to sanctions on Iran. As this drumbeat got louder in the run-up to the conference, and as their problems started to multiply, they tacked right on both these issues. On Goldstone, Jeremy Ben-Ami, the J Street director, went to Jeffrey Goldberg and said, we refuse to embrace that report. What does that mean? It's not quite clear. So I asked Haydar Suskind, who is their policy director, I said, you refuse to embrace the report, and yet you have not condemned the report. And he told me there's a lot of space between embrace and condemn, right, which is no position at all. But it's good. At least they came off these sort of ludicrous left-wing positions that are totally at odds with the American Jewish community. They can't quite bring themselves to join the moderate mainstream of the American Jewish community on those issues because they risk alienating their core support.
But they say they're not at odds with the American Jewish community. Their view is dialogue is being suppressed in this country. And what American Jews really feel is something that simply cannot be publicly spoken because of a stranglehold on discourse in this country, and here they clearly blame AIPAC. Now, you clearly don't believe there's any warrant for that.
No, I think that's look, they're here, they're saying whatever they want. You can say whatever you want in this country. But at the end of the day, American Jews and every major Jewish organization in Israel, including very left-wing Jewish organizations in Israel, Everyone has condemned this Goldstone report. The administration has condemned it. Congress has condemned it. And yet they refuse to condemn it.
If the narrative looking forward 10 years, if we were sitting in these very chairs in Riggs Library in Georgetown University 10 years from now, and the narrative was there was this group called J Street, and they started off and their message was all over the place, and it tended to tack sometimes to the radical left, but they looked at their constituency, they looked at their interests, and they purged the radical left, and they moved on to represent a left-of-center American Jewish viewpoint that was clearly within the Zionist consensus. Wouldn't that be a happy story?
I don't think that's likely to happen.
But would it be a happy story?
Sure, but it would be a redundant organization. I think at the end of the day, AIPAC gets a pretty bad rap. Most of the people at AIPAC are Democrats, okay? This is not a right-wing organization, contrary to a lot of the attacks on it. People there are politically left of center, but on Israel, they are not. On Israel, they are for a strong U.S.-Israel relationship, regardless of politics. So I think what happens here is actually the American Jewish community, yes, it's a left-wing community for the most part. It's a liberal community. But on this issue, not so much. Okay. On this issue, it's not about traditional left-right politics. On this issue, they're just for a strong U.S.-Israel relationship.
All right, we've been speaking with Michael Goldfarb of the Weekly Standard. Thank you so much for coming and talking with us today.
Thank you for having me.